The Greyhound bus pulled out from the terminal on Washington Boulevard in downtown Detroit, carrying a load of passengers from the Motor City all the way to the green sides of Seattle, Washington. With one suitcase and a paper bag filled with a few sandwiches, in 1953, my grandfather hopped off that bus and straight to the YMCA, where he paid $10 a day for a room and ate French fries for a meal before beginning his job as an aircraft technician at Boeing, earning $2.38 per hour. My grandfather was many of early innovation workers who left their families and their home countries to put widgets and thingamabobs together for automakers and airline industries and early hardware companies that laid the foundation for the computer systems and video games we use today. As our family's resident technophile, and the man who bought me my first computer in the 90s, Grandpa would never make the history books for his contributions to the industry at large, but his story and the stories of thousands of tech workers of color who helped to lay the foundation for the advancements of technologies that define society, these stories are critical to how we determine who gets to design the future. So Grandpa got his job at Boeing after spending 2 years in a training program at a radio and electronics trade school. Right here, if you see second row on your left, the handsome gentleman at the top corner, you can spot him, that's my grandpa. After earning his certificate, he quickly migrated west, similar to how his parents had left Alabama and the Jim Crow South, heading north for the promise of better pay and safety from racial violence. And a decade before my grandfather landed at Boeing, stenographer Larice Spearman became the very first African-American worker at the company, and a trail of African-American tech workers followed suit. During this time, corporate companies like Boeing and IBM and JCPenney, all of them had strict policies prohibiting the hiring of Black people and immigrants of color. But thanks to federal law and labor activist pressure and the demand for skilled labor following World War II, workers of color had the first opportunity to contribute to industries and earn a living that were defining an American innovation. And yet, we still get to name these guys as household names, as the leading faces of innovation. Show of hands. How many of you all can identify who everyone on this screen is? Okay, looks pretty unanimous. Okay, all right. You don't have to be a techie in order to know who these guys are, right? Now, what about this crew of folks? Anyone know who these folks are? Well, let me help you out. So Aisha Evans, on my right, is CEO of Zoosk, of a self-driving car company worth $1 billion. CEO Donnell Baird of BlockPower helps lower-income communities reduce energy costs and help to train green workers. And Jasmine Crow, the CEO of Gooder, runs a software platform that helps to divert food waste from restaurants and grocery stores and directs them to food-insecure communities and families. So for many of us millennials who can remember a time before the internet, if you were learning anything about computer programming or anything about learning code, you were told to aspire to become the next Bill Gates or even the next Steve Jobs. But rarely was there reference to people who looked like me or came from communities that I came from. According to EEOC data, Black and Hispanic workers make up 15% of the tech industry, and women make up 28%. And yet, we're still referencing the folks who look like the guys I showed you on the screen earlier. That's the dominant story. That's the dominant profile. It wasn't Gates, it wasn't Jobs, it wasn't Zuckerberg who made me want to fire up a computer and made me want to start creating my own websites and games in my early years of learning how to code. It was my grandpa. And the mentors of color and the folks from all backgrounds who showed me that I too could be an innovator. So 7 years ago, I launched a daily tech news publication called The Plug. We covered trends within the Black innovation economy. It was a hobby that helped me to stay sane while working in the tech industry But back then, there weren't many stories published or any kind of investigative research being done that was taking a look at Black and brown narratives of founders and builders, or those who were even leading advanced technologies or capital, despite the fact that they were building future-focused work around the world. Eventually, my hobby turned into a business. My team and I started to build years of databases and taking stories and all of these things that analysts and reporters were missing. Our viral stories included documenting Black-owned co-working spaces during the time when the WeWorks of the world were the only ones being seen. We published a series of databases of patents earned by historically Black colleges and universities since the 1970s until present day, demonstrating how these institutions have long been contributing to innovation and also supporting and raising up generations of Black engineers and scientists and inventors. We even built an early database tracking AI researchers of color in the US, Europe, as well as Africa. And when we landed a licensing deal and became the first Black business publication to syndicate our data stories on the Bloomberg terminal, celebrating this accomplishment had proven that a narrative was sorely missing and the knowledge base of innovation happening in real time. It also kind of proved that we've been okay as a nation and as an innovation industry with using incomplete data without asking who might be missing from the story. Now, I believe it's time that we rethink where genius comes from and where it comes from and what it looks like. When we question the data and the profiles of one singular story, we then rethink who we empower to design our story and our future. Our most advanced tech tools are trained on the data that exists today, but we rarely ask if said data is audited or interrogated for which stories it actually neglects. So let's talk about the recent AI ChatGPT tool. We can ask this system to create reports. We can ask them to help us give a list of the top 100 inventions that would have changed society and our lives. And the potential for these systems to perpetuate misinformation and erase the histories of diverse peoples is significant. There are no checks and balances around whether or not the root data has been tested for flawless accuracy or even for bias. So imagine the negative consequences that can take place when professionals and investors start to task this technology with making decisions on how to invest in the future, if key parts of the information are actually missing. We see this reality play out in real time with advanced technologies that skip gathering data and stories from diverse sources. So let's take, for instance, facial recognition technology, which was largely built by white guys in the lab. And then when tested by Dr. Joy Buolamwini at MIT, she discovered that the technology could not identify darker skin or female faces. So now we have folks like the ACLU who are pushing back against some of this technology, especially in law enforcement, as it has often misidentified suspects, mostly Black males, and have led to many wrongful arrests. And in its simplest form, when representation doesn't take place in data, we get some culturally tone-deaf technologies. Sometimes when I try to wash my hands in the undermated sink and I gotta turn my palms over a couple times, right? I mean, I still wash my hands, right? We're all still washing our hands, right? Following pandemic protocols. A 2019 talk in Harvard University by Princeton University professor and sociologist Dr. Ruha Benjamin, she asserts, technology inherits its creative biases. Social norms, values, structures all exist prior to any given tech development. So it's not simply the impact of technology, but the social inputs that make some inventions appear to be inevitable and desirable. So how do we limit the occurrences of biases in the technology that we build? When we are intentional about how we collect and use stories and data to see what's been overlooked, we spend more time understanding and building the value creation of technology that challenges the status quo. This allows us to design a much more equitable future that solves more problems than just for one group of people. So one of the stories that we actually covered at the plug was of Susani of Dollar Ride. He's a technologist who would spend the summers as a kid with his uncle, who was a van driver. He drove the dollar van in the boroughs of New York City. So today, Sani built a company, Dollar Ride, which developed technology to help some of these small business owners use technology to connect transit riders who are typically underserved by local public transportation. So this came in handy during the first year of the pandemic, when majority of the communities who were considered essential workers and they worked in service-based jobs, they saw the shutdown of the MTA. It was Dollar Ride that was able to help quickly coordinate shuttles with local transit authorities and small business owners to help get people back to work long after the trains stopped running. Another story I'm reminded of is that of Yvette Ellis and Camille Terry of Charger Help. These two Black women in Compton, whose background in government workforce development gave them a strong foundation for building a technical training model to help put people to work in the green-collar workforce. They're building a scalable business that leverages contracts with electrical vehicle machine manufacturers and training up Americans from all types of backgrounds to become machine technicians. And in their model, they're turning everyday people into innovation contributors, where those who are certified can earn upwards of $35 per hour, repairing the machines that are fueling the world of new electric car vehicles. Today, we have to ensure that our research goes deeper, our data collection much wider, and our questions about the stories we're inputting into our systems much more inclusive. So how do we do this? So first, we have to expand our data set beyond the status quo. If we're leading studies, if we're training systems, we have to ask who is not represented in this data. If we need more inclusive data, we have to find the right partners. We have to take the necessary time to get the stories of others that might be affected by the outcome of this work. And then secondly, we remove biased language. We have to remove the deficit narratives. It's nearly impossible to imagine a future of possibility and opportunity when our language is rooted in negative stereotypes and stories. And then finally, we start to course correct our history by finding new stories to tell. Where there are points of discrimination in our history, we can find a people and communities whose contributions have largely been unacknowledged or overlooked. And by telling these old and new stories, we remove our assumptions about the capabilities of communities and people who are different from us. And then we build through a lens of respect and recognition, which ultimately help us to build better and more meaningful products and solutions, fitting more than just one archetype. I am grateful for my grandfather for taking what was a 3-day bus trip to a city he didn't know, with no family, and no chance to get it wrong. He was my first example of genius in a world full of narratives that would never name him as such. We have to set the standard. We have to set the standard to understand what stories are missing and which information arcs are overlooking the data so that we can build a much more interesting and dynamic future. Thank you.